Joshua Whitmore thought he was looking at a dead body when he found her sprawled among the red rocks near Devil's Canyon. The feathered shaft of an arrow protruded from her left side, dark blood staining the torn fabric of her traditional dress. But then he saw her chest rise and fall, barely perceptible in the harsh Wyoming sunlight. What happened next would change everything he thought he knew about honor, debt, and the mysterious bonds that connect strangers across cultures. But first, let me tell you how a simple act of mercy awakened a secret that had been buried for 30 years, and why 3 powerful chiefs would kneel in the dust before a man they'd never met. The September heat was brutal that day in 1888, the kind that made the air shimmer like water and turned the ground to baked clay. Joshua had been tracking a missing calf for 3 hours, following its prints through the maze of arroyos and boulder fields that marked the edge of his property. At 42, he'd been working this harsh land for 15 years, and he knew every rock formation, every hidden spring, every place where a young animal might seek shelter from predators. What he didn't expect to find was a human being dying, slowly in the shadow of the ancient red stones. She looked to be about 19 or 20, with long black hair braided with small silver ornaments that caught the light as she breathed. Her buckskin dress was beautifully crafted, decorated with intricate beadwork that spoke of high status within her tribe. But it was the arrow that made Joshua's blood run cold. The shaft entered just below her left ribs, angled upward in a way that suggested it had been shot from below, probably while she was on horseback. The fletching was distinctive, made from turkey feathers with red and black markings that Joshua didn't recognize. More troubling was the fact that the arrowhead was iron, not traditional stone or bone, which meant this wasn't some random hunting accident. Joshua knelt beside her, careful not to jostle the arrow shaft. Her skin was pale beneath its natural bronze color, and her breathing was shallow and labored. A small pool of blood had formed beneath her, but not as much as he'd expected, which meant the arrow might be acting like a cork, preventing her from bleeding out completely. Her eyes fluttered open as he leaned over her, and Joshua found himself looking into dark brown depths filled with pain, but also with a fierce intelligence that reminded him of his late wife. The young woman tried to speak, but only managed a whisper in what sounded like Shoshone. "Easy," Joshua said softly. "I'm going to help you." She tried to sit up, but the movement caused fresh blood to seep around the arrow shaft. Joshua gently pressed her back down, noting how her muscles tensed with the effort not to cry out. "I know it hurts, but you can't move yet. That arrow is the only thing keeping you from bleeding to death right now." Whether she understood his words or just his tone, she stopped struggling and fixed her gaze on his face. Joshua could see her evaluating him, trying to determine if he represented salvation or just another threat. The nearest doctor was in Cheyenne, a day's hard ride away. At the pace, Joshua would have to travel with a severely wounded person. It would take 2 days, assuming she survived the journey. The smart thing would be to make her as comfortable as possible and ride for help. But Joshua's gut told him she didn't have that much time. He'd removed arrows before, during his time as a cavalry scout in the Apache campaigns. It was dangerous work that required steady hands and a lot of luck, but sometimes it was the only option. "I'm going to take you to my ranch," he told her, not sure if she could understand, but needing to explain anyway. "It's about a mile from here. I'm going to have to move you, and it's going to hurt, but I think I can help you." She studied his face for a long moment, then gave an almost imperceptible nod. Joshua carefully lifted her, one arm under her shoulders and another supporting her legs, taking extreme care not to disturb the arrow. She bit back a gasp of pain, but didn't struggle, which told him she understood the gravity of her situation. The walk back to his ranch house felt like the longest mile of his life. Joshua's ranch house was modest but well built. constructed from logs and stone to withstand the harsh Wyoming winters. He carried the wounded woman straight to his bedroom, the only space in the house, with enough room and light for what he was about to attempt. She remained conscious throughout the careful journey, her dark eyes tracking every detail of her surroundings, with the wariness of someone who'd learned never to trust unfamiliar territory. He laid her gently on his bed, propping her up with pillows to keep pressure off the arrow shaft. The movement caused fresh bleeding, and he could see her jaw clench against the pain, but she made no sound. "I need to clean this wound and remove that arrow," Joshua explained, gathering supplies from his medical kit. "It's going to hurt worse than anything you've ever felt, but if I don't do it, you'll die." She spoke for the first time since he'd found her, her voice weak but clear. "I understand." Her English was perfect, with only the slightest accent, and Joshua felt both surprise and relief. Communication would make this ordeal easier for both of them. "What's your name?" he asked while heating water on the stove. "Kaya," she replied, "daughter of Chief Tahatan of the Northern Shoshone." Joshua's hands stilled on the medical supplies. Tahatan was a name he knew well, spoken with respect, and sometimes fear throughout the territory. The chief was said to be one of the last great war leaders, a man who'd never signed a treaty and never surrendered, leading his people in the old ways while avoiding open conflict with the army. "A chief's daughter," Joshua murmured. "That explains the quality of your clothing." Kaya's eyes narrowed slightly. "Does it change what you plan to do?" "Not a bit." Joshua returned to his preparations, laying out clean cloths, a sharp knife, and a bottle of whiskey that would serve as both anesthetic and antiseptic. "Though I imagine your father might have opinions about a white rancher operating on his daughter, my father will honor any debt of life," Kaya said quietly. "That is our way." Joshua began cleaning around the wound, noting that the arrow had been carefully crafted. The shaft was straight and smooth, the fletching expertly attached. This wasn't the work of some random attacker, but of a skilled warrior. "Who shot you?" he asked. Kaya's expression darkened. "Crow warriors. 3 of them attacked our hunting party near the Yellowstone. They killed my brother and 2 cousins before I could escape." Joshua felt his chest tighten. Tribal conflicts were nothing new in this territory, but the death of a chief's son would have serious consequences for everyone in the region. "Why were you so far from your people?" "We were following the old trails, gathering sacred herbs for the autumn ceremonies. The crow knew we would be there." She paused, pain flickering across her features. "Someone told them where to find us." The implication hung heavy in the air. Tribal movements were usually secret, known only to the bands themselves, unless someone had been providing information to their enemies. Joshua positioned his hands carefully around the arrow shaft. "I'm going to count to 3, then pull it out." "Bast, are you ready?" Kaya nodded, gripping the blanket beneath her with both hands. 1. Joshua pulled the arrow free in one smooth motion, not bothering with 2 or 3. The shaft came out cleanly, followed by a gush of dark blood that he immediately pressed clean cloths against. Kaya's back arched with the shock of pain, but she bit back any sound. The arrowhead was indeed iron, forged in a distinctive leaf shape that Joshua recognized from his army days. This wasn't native metalwork, but the product of a white blacksmith, probably from one of the trading posts. "Someone's been selling weapons to the Crow," he observed, showing Kaya the arrowhead. Her eyes widened as she recognized the significance. "That is forbidden by treaty." Both tribes agreed never to use white man's weapons against each other. Joshua cleaned the wound thoroughly, working as quickly as possible while Kaya fought to remain conscious. The arrow had missed her vital organs, but the damage was still serious. Without proper care, infection would kill her within days. As he stitched the wound closed, Kaya spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you helping me?" "Because it's right," Joshua replied without looking up from his work. "And because I've seen enough people die from wounds that could have been healed. You were a soldier. It wasn't a question. Something in his movements or manner had given him away. Once, long time ago." Joshua finished the last stitch and bandaged the wound carefully. "Get some rest. You've lost a lot of blood." As Kaya's eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion finally overcoming. Pain and adrenaline, Joshua found himself wondering what consequences his act of mercy might bring. Saving a chief's daughter could be seen as an act of friendship or interference, depending on perspectives he couldn't predict. He had no way of knowing that by dawn, his entire world would change. Joshua woke before dawn to the sound of horses. Approaching his ranch, not the casual pace of travelers, but the deliberate rhythm of a war party moving with purpose. He reached for his rifle and moved to the window, peering through the pre-dawn darkness at shapes that materialized like ghosts from the gray landscape. 30 mounted warriors sat motionless just beyond his fence line, their horses perfectly, still in the way that spoke of exceptional training and discipline. As the first light of dawn touched the eastern hills, Joshua could make out the elaborate war paint and eagle feathers that marked these men as chiefs and war leaders, not common raiders. In his bedroom, Kaya stirred at the sound of movement. Despite her injuries, she pushed herself up to sitting, her face pale but determined. "My people have come," she said simply. Joshua helped her to the window, supporting her weight as she looked out at the assembled warriors. Her sharp intake of breath told him this was even more significant than he'd realized. "Those are not just my father's men," she whispered. "I see Chief Washakie of the Eastern Shoshone, Chief Tendoi of the Lemhi, and Chief Pocatello of the Northwestern. Bands, the 4 greatest chiefs of our nation together. They came looking for you?" "No." Kaya's voice carried a note of wonder. "They came because of you." Before Joshua could ask what she meant, the lead warrior dismounted and approached the house. Even from a distance, Joshua could see this was a man of immense presence, with silver threading through his long black hair and scars marking his arms that spoke of countless battles survived. "That is my father, Chief Tahatan," Kaya confirmed. The chief stopped 10 feet from Joshua's front porch and called out in clear English, "Joshua Whitmore, son of Captain Samuel Whitmore of the 7th Cavalry." Joshua felt the blood drain from his face. Nobody had called him by his father's rank in over 20 years. Samuel Whitmore had died when Joshua was 12, killed in a skirmish with the Lakota near Fort Laramie in 1858. "I am Tahatan, and I would speak with you." Joshua helped Kaya back to bed, then walked outside, his rifle held low but ready. The 30 warriors watched him with expressions he couldn't read, their painted faces giving nothing away. "Chief Tahatan," Joshua acknowledged with a respectful nod. "Your daughter is recovering. She's badly injured but alive." "I know. The spirits told us she lived, and they told us who saved her." Tahatan's dark eyes studied Joshua intently. "But that is not why we have come." The chief reached into a beaded pouch at his side and withdrew something that made Joshua's knees nearly buckle. It was a cavalry officer's insignia, tarnished with age but unmistakably from the 7th Regiment. "This belonged to your father," Tahatan said. "He gave it to me 30 years ago, along with his word of honor." Joshua stared at the insignia, memories flooding back of his father's stories about his time in the cavalry, his respect for the native tribes he'd encountered, and his belief that honor transcended the color of a man's skin. "I don't understand," Joshua managed. "Your father saved my life during the winter of 1858. I was a young war chief then, trapped by a blizzard with my hunting party. We would have frozen to death, but Captain Whitmore found us and shared his regiment's supplies even though we were supposed to be enemies." Tahatan held up the insignia so all the assembled warriors could see it. He asked for nothing in return except my word that the debt would be remembered. I gave him this insignia as a token of that promise." The old chief's voice carried across the morning air as he continued. "I swore by the sacred mountains that if any child of Samuel Whitmore ever needed aid, my people would provide it. If any child of Samuel Whitmore showed honor to my people, that honor would be returned tenfold." Joshua felt the weight of 30 years of history settling on his shoulders as he understood what was happening. "Last night, my daughter's spirit spoke to mine in dreams. She told me that Samuel Whitmore's son had given her life when death was certain, asking for nothing, risking much." Tahatan paused, looking directly into Joshua's eyes. "The debt of life creates sacred bonds that pass from father to son, from generation to generation." Then, to Joshua's amazement, Chief Tahatan knelt in the dust before his porch. One by one, the other chiefs followed suit. Washaki, Tendoi, Pocatello, and every warrior in the assembled party, until 30 of the most powerful leaders in the Rocky Mountain region were bowing before a simple rancher. "We have come to honor the debt," Tahatan announced, his voice carrying the weight of ancient ritual, "to acknowledge that the son has proven worthy of the father's memory." Joshua stood frozen on his porch, overwhelmed by the sight of 30 powerful leaders kneeling in his dusty yard. The morning sun cast long shadows across the assembled warriors, and the silence stretched until it felt sacred, like being inside a cathedral built from sky and stone. "Please," Joshua finally managed, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Please stand, I don't deserve this honor." Chief Tahatan rose slowly, his weathered face showing something that might have been approval. "That is exactly why you do deserve it. A man who saves life without thought of reward, who honors the helpless without expectation of return, carries the spirit of true leadership." The other chiefs rose as well, and Joshua could see that this moment meant something profound to them, something beyond what he could fully understand. Chief Washaki, the eldest of the assembled leaders, stepped forward with the careful movements of a man whose body had endured decades of hardship. "Joshua Whitmore," Washaki said in a voice that carried the authority of 70 winters, "your father's kindness planted seeds that have grown for 30 years. Yesterday, when you chose to save Tahatan's daughter rather than turn away, those seeds bore fruit." From inside the house, Joshua heard movement, and Kaya appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of his blankets but standing under her own power. The assembled warriors murmured approvingly at seeing their chief's daughter alive and recovering. "My daughter tells me you removed the arrow with your own hands," Tahatan continued, "that you risked her life and your own safety to heal her wounds. This is the same courage, the same honor that your father showed to my people." Kaya moved carefully to stand beside Joshua, her presence adding weight to the moment. "Father, I must tell you something important. The arrow that wounded me was made by white blacksmiths and sold to Crow warriors. Someone is providing our enemies with weapons and information about our movements." The chiefs exchanged glances loaded with meaning. This was news that would require careful consideration and decisive action. "We suspected as much," Chief Pocatello said grimly. 3 hunting parties have been ambushed in the past month, always by enemies who knew exactly where to find them. Tahatan turned back to Joshua. "This is why the debt between our peoples must be honored publicly. There are those who would divide us, who profit from our conflicts. But when a white man risks everything to save a native woman, when honor crosses the boundaries that others try to build, those divisions become lies." Chief Tendoi stepped forward, carrying a magnificent war lance decorated with eagle feathers and intricate beadwork. "This belonged to my grandfather, who carried it in the last great buffalo hunt before the herds disappeared. I offer it to you as a symbol of our alliance." One by one, The other chiefs presented gifts: a ceremonial tomahawk, a medicine bag crafted from white buffalo hide, a necklace of bear claws that signified courage in battle. But it was Tahatan's final gesture that moved Joshua most deeply. The old chief removed a silver bracelet from his own wrist, heavy with turquoise stones and carved with symbols Joshua couldn't read. "This has been worn by the war chiefs of my family for 7 generations. It carries the protection of our ancestors and the promise of our friendship." As Tahatan fastened the bracelet around Joshua's wrist, he spoke quietly so only Joshua could hear. "Your ranch sits on the old trading route between our peoples. In the days to come, when tensions rise and men choose sides, this place will be a sanctuary where honor matters more than the color of a man's skin." Kaya touched Joshua's arm gently. "What my father is offering you is more than friendship. He is making you family, bound by sacred ties that will protect you and your descendants for generations to come." The sun was fully up now, painting the Wyoming landscape in golden light that made the assembled warriors look like figures from legend. As the chiefs prepared to depart, Joshua realized that his simple act of compassion had awakened something larger than he'd ever imagined. "The debt is paid," Tahatan announced, mounting his horse with fluid grace despite his years. "But the friendship has only begun." As the warriors rode away, disappearing into the vastness of the Wyoming territory as silently as they'd arrived, Joshua stood with Kaya on his porch, watching until the last rider vanished beyond the horizon. "What happens now?" he asked. Kaya smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since finding her wounded among the rocks. "Now we begin building the bridge my father spoke of, a place where 2 worlds can meet in peace." The silver bracelet caught the morning light as Joshua raised his hand to shade his eyes, and he understood that he'd been chosen for something far greater than he'd ever expected. Sometimes a single moment of choosing mercy over convenience could change the course of history itself. In the days that followed, Joshua's ranch would indeed become a sanctuary, a neutral ground where disputes could be settled and alliances forged. And it all began with one man who couldn't walk away from someone in need. If this story reminded you that courage comes in many forms and that honoring others creates bonds that last for generations, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that small acts of kindness can have profound consequences. What's your most powerful story of unexpected honor or friendship that crossed cultural boundaries? Share it in the comments below. Your experience might inspire our next video. Thank you for watching, and remember, true leadership isn't about commanding others, but about serving with integrity when no one is watching.